understand.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of The Real Spill, a podcast where I spill on all things multifamily advocacy and how we as industry professionals can work with our elected officials, stakeholders, and allies to bring about change for the rental housing industry. My guests are subject matter experts whose unique perspectives will help listeners understand how the issues impact them. Let's get into The Real Spill. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of The Real Spill here on the Multifamily Media Network. And with me today is dear friend and industry icon, the one and only Liz Newkirk. Welcome, Liz.
Hello. Hi, everybody. So nice to be here. Thank you for having me today, Katie.
Of course. And for those of you who don't know, Liz and I work very closely together. We're very good friends, and now we work together to where, like, she's my team lead, so we work really close together to get information out that is impacting our industry. And as part of it, I was thinking through what I wanted the month of February to look like for my guests. I'm like, well, it's Black History Month, and March is Women's History Month, and I know few other people who have made both history for women and Black women and for the Black community than Liz. So it was just an honor to have you on here today with me, Liz. Thank you again.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It is an honor to be here in light of Black History Month and also, like you said, Women's History Month, two really great occasions and opportunities for us to celebrate women. And I just want to take an opportunity to celebrate you as well and all that you're doing, you know, for us and our industry. It is just phenomenal and an honor to work with you. And like I said, to be on this segment, you're doing phenomenal work as always.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think everyone knows both of us really for what it is that we do for the multifamily industry. And it's hard to think of either of us ever having a life and a career prior to the multifamily industry, but it's the truth. Like, would you tell listeners, what were you doing before multifamily?
Oh, man. I definitely am sure, like most people, stumbled into the multifamily world in some way, shape, or form. And what it is that I started off doing was I worked for a assisted living facility, an organization, actually doing marketing, not really thinking too much about it. I was just looking for a job. My mom was the manager, you know, so I was looking for something that was going to give me some sort of marketing experience, because when I graduated high school, that was the 2005, era. And believe it or not, they were talking about the Great Recession then, right? We just didn't know like how bad it was going to be. So when I got to college, I was looking for an opportunity because all of the marketing, all of the sales, jobs were essentially gone. And so I ended up interning there, working there for a while, collaborating with Emory Hospital down in Georgia, my home state. And then I ended up getting into retail. I love fashion. I love clothes. I'm probably like one of those people that watches the runway, shows, and I'm looking to see what the hottest and newest trends are. And so I got into retail. My first ever job, my first big girl job was working at Swarovski. I was there for a while, worked my way all the way up to becoming a manager. And then I stayed in retail for a long time. I worked for brands like Fossil and Express, and I mainly worked in the realm of visual merchandising and being a retail manager. And eventually at Fossil, I just recognized the doom that was coming to retail due to, retail giant, if you want to call them that, Amazon. And nobody really thought that Amazon was going to have an impact on brick and mortar stores the way that they do now. And so the writing was kind of on the wall for me. I figured that I needed to really see if I can get back into the realm of marketing. And I was very lucky that an acoustics company, they basically sold foam in the manufacturing space. I just applied for the job just to see like what was going to happen. And I'll never forget, my boss's name was Tyler Keeley, and he ended up giving me a job. And he was like, we'll just going to work and see how it happens. He's like, this whole digital, Facebook thing, I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me, but let's just see how it works. And, he was very open to taking risks. And he took a chance on me, and I stayed there for a while. And then I ended up working with a company that did government contracts. So it was basically like very heightened security, working with the Department of Defense, doing those government type of, situations that I can't really speak too much on. But it was really cool, like doing that and getting that experience and working in the manufacturing space. And if I'm honest with you, it's because of those very complex like calculations and restrictions that really led me to be able to work at Loeb, Sack and Brownlee in a way that is not very, traditional, and kind of bring some value to our brand and doing some non-traditional practices. So I just got really lucky, in doing some of these fun things, and just kind of, like I said, stumbled into the multifamily space as a leasing agent. I think a lot of us started off that way. And it's just been an amazing opportunity to see how it's all evolved and I've grown over time.
Your steps, you stumbled, but your steps were being ordered. Like,
oh, most definitely. Most definitely. Not really to my own knowledge. Like if you would have told me, back when I was working at Fossil or even in manufacturing, I thought I was going to be in manufacturing forever. I thought that I was going to be in that world forever, but that's not the way that it worked out. There was a time where there was, tariffs and layoffs and, just the complexity of foreign and international trade was just becoming very, very complex. And typically what happens when the world gets complex is, the marketing budget has the tendency to get cut. And so I just knew that I needed to be a student and develop some skills. And I just really started to focus on the digital marketing and the digital marketing space and just see how I can hone in on the degree that I got from Johnson C. Smith in marketing and communications.
And so how did you find a leasing consultant position advertised? Like, were you online or did you know somebody?
No, it was completely by accident. It was like Bob Ross says, like happy little accidents, right? So what ended up happening was I had just spruced up my LinkedIn. Again, I'm in digital marketing and I know the power of social media content. And so I ended up being on LinkedIn, and a regional manager reached out to me with Cottonwood Residential and was just like, hey, like I've seen your retail background. I think you'd be phenomenal in this role. And I was like, sure, like, I don't know what this all entails, but I feel like I could sell ice to an Eskimo. So I'm up for the challenge. Let's go for it. And I did my interview, and she was asking me about my position and my time at Victoria's Secret. And I was like, oh, yeah, like, I work with Kate. And she was like, at the time, her name was Irving. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, she's a good friend of mine. She's like, this is her old job. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? So she called Kate, like right then and there, and asked her about me. And she's like, oh, yeah, this is an easy conversation, because Kate and I had worked together in retail for at least five or 10 years at multiple store locations, retail locations. And so coming on board and having and building those relationships. And that's why I tell people it's so important to make sure that you have a good personal brand and that you have really good values and a good digital footprint. Because if I didn't, I never would have gotten that job. And I never would be sitting here with you today. So me making sure that I had those items in place definitely led me up to be where I am. And I'm very grateful for that.
It's amazing what I've learned from you just working with you about digital marketing and branding, especially as it relates to a law firm. Like, a lot of people don't know this, but law firms can't advertise.
No. No, they cannot. The way in which it is that we do our advertising is very restrictive. So it is mainly set by, the bar in every single state. And I would love to say that every, bar association is advanced and they understand the complexity of marketing and digital marketing, but that is not the case. And so we have to work within the realm of the world that they give us or that they offer us. So we can't just post or just advertise and say things like, come to our booth or, what have you. There are some things that we have to be very precautious with, because it allows for us to be able to move forward in practice. So I say that's where the manufacturing experience I have really comes into play, because there's a lot of copyright, there's a lot of restrictions, there's a lot of ethics. Everything that you say about a product has to be true. If in any way or any shape and form it is not true, it is not accurate, based off of the information that you got from the engineering department, you could be sued. And I don't mean like 5,000, 10,000. I'm talking about millions of dollars, right? And so we have to make sure that all of the information that we put out is ethical, it's accurate, and it's correct. Because if it's not, it could really have dire consequences. You are correct, Katie.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people wonder, like, okay, we're at trade shows and you see different companies saying, oh, come see me. I'm at booth 17 or we're booth 17, 18. We can't do that. So although we're at these events for all of the affiliates that we're in the market, we can't do that and say that. So that's why if anybody's ever wondered, like I did at one point, and it's important, even like you educate our team, like you tell them like, okay, you guys are going, but you can't say, we can do the I'm attending. We do those kind of things.
Right.
But they can't say, Attorney Joe Blow can't say, come see me at this booth. It's a big bad no-no.
Right. There's no such thing as someone who is an expert within like the realm of law. You know what I mean? Right. So you're a lawyer, you're an attorney, but you cannot say I'm an expert. That is not, no, right. We can't do that. So again, it really boils down to, in my role, being able to connect with senior leaders and connect with our partners and connect with our attorneys. And, even you and I working together and giving information out to our clients. There's a lot of touches that my role has on any given day, on any given basis. It definitely keeps me on my toes, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we definitely vet things and go back and forth sometimes. And sometimes we make the decision that, it's not a good fit for us to put certain information out. I mean, there's more to it than just sharing a story or what have you. Yes. You absolutely cannot be reckless with it. Like it's very serious.
Most definitely. I joke, and I actually got this from you and a few other people that call me Olivia Pope, because it's like, it's a PR thing. You know what I mean? Like if we say something and it's not correct, it can have dire consequences, because of course, as big as our world is, it's also very small. So all it takes is for one person to say, oh, well, I read this on the Lovesac and Brownlee website. And if it's not accurate, if it's not true, the last thing that we want to do is give people, not the full story or any type of false or non-verified information. So we're very thorough before anything gets posted, whether it's on our blog and our news portal that's on our website, or even on our social media pages. And even when our attorneys go out and they teach lunch and learns or they teach classes, it's very important for them to have the accurate information, the most up-to-date information. And I think that is one of the biggest components of the LB Advantage when we talk about that. It's not just, oh, well, we are really good at lawyering, or we're really good at being able to get, some type of result. It may not always be the wanted result, but a good result, for our clients that's in their best interest. But it's also about being able to understand what's going on in our clients' world, which is why we're very involved within the multifamily associations, even the single family and build to rent associations, like yourself. Like you said at the very beginning, everyone knows you, and that's because you're involved. And because you're involved, we know about the things that are coming up and how quickly things can change, right? Like we were doing evictions in a normalized, typical manner to some degree. And then the eviction moratorium and the CARES Act came around, and then all of a sudden it changed. And we had to understand how that worked and how to best communicate it for our clients. And that's what makes us very, very different from everyone else.
It's absolutely a team and a group effort. And I've said this so many times. I've worked with so many teams over the years, amazing teams.
Yeah.
But consistency, just the acumen that this group of individuals has. These are the most competent, capable, hardworking people that I've ever had the pleasure of working with, where they make you, like, they match your hustle and then some. Like they continuously, whether they know it or not, the attorneys and the teams around us push us to be better versions of ourselves. And, there's that next generation watching us, and we're always ready, which I'm excited to share. I have a chair for Upper States Government Affairs Council. And I'll out her now, Amanda Davis with Bell Partners. Thank you.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. She just won Leasing Consultant of the Year for Upper State. Yep.
Yes.
And came in through Entryway. So
that's amazing. Entryway is an amazing organization doing great things.
They are. And, we're sometimes looking to pass the torch, once we've done what it is that we can, and want to have that fresh perspective. So we never know who's watching us. And that's obviously for you to be here, somebody at LMB was watching you. How did your path cross? Like, was it with Chris or Jared, or who did you meet first? How did that happen?
Yeah. Again, like, I wish I could say that, like, I was stalking Chris. Like, that was not the case at all. I actually met Chris when I was a leasing agent, and we were getting, at the time, the very raw lunch and learn program. It hadn't been fully developed yet. It was being able to have that time to have like a one-on-one with an attorney, which I thought was really, really cool, because, you don't always get that opportunity. You don't always get the ability to be able to ask specific questions, not case specific questions, because we can't, but, just generalized questions, where it's not via email, and you can at least try to get some type of insight, if that makes sense. And so, Chris came to our property, and we just had like a very light conversation just about fair housing and fair housing practices, and that world in the realm, was changing, especially around reasonable accommodations. So it was like, if someone wants this, like, how do we navigate that? Especially me, like, I didn't really know. And so it was really cool to get that information directly from the source, and someone so knowledgeable as Chris Lovesack is. And, when I got into the manufacturing space and I ended up leaving the multifamily area, I still had some relationships and I still kept up with people. And someone recommended me to Chris, and they were like, I know Liz, I can stand by her and I can stand by her work. And I had an interview with Chris, and Chris was like, you're either a rock star, you either got it or you don't, right? And it's just one of those things where I was like, I can promise you, that if I don't have a specific skill set, I can figure it out. Like the person you had on here prior to me, Shanae, like, she's a very determined and competitive person and an individual. And I adopted that, from her and from some of the other attorneys that we work with. And I was like, I'm going to do what it is that needs to be done. And I'm going to make sure that people not just know who Lovesack and Brownlee is, but they know the people, and that they also understand what we as a brand stand for. And I think that was very important, was adding the personalization to the brand. And I'm just very grateful for that opportunity to take that risk and just kind of flip things on their heads a little bit, and even make some of our members of our firm uncomfortable, but also tap into something that they may not even know that they had. So yeah, that's the way that I kind of stumbled into Lovesack and Brownlee 5 years later.
It's amazing. And the way that the firm operates, it's not been done like this before. I don't know of any other firm who has like branding the way that it is that we have. And it's all thanks to you and your collaboration with Chris and the partners and the E-team. And we talked a little bit about it, but can you tell listeners like exactly how much, like, I don't think people understand how much it is that you do. Like, you touch everything. Like, if it's out there for the world to see, it has crossed your path in some way, shape, or form.
Yes. So we have, like you mentioned, multiple departments. We have Sam, who I don't think needs any introduction at this point. She's our strategic partnerships manager. And oftentimes we do a lot of ads and advertising. We have our exhibition spaces and booths at trade shows. We have all of those things, our education centers, whether they're in person, like at USAA, which is the Upper State Apartment Association, you're very familiar with, obviously. And we also have have our virtual education centers, like what we have at Myrtle Beach, and some ones that are hybrid, like at the Piedmont Triad Apartment Association. So with that being said, anything that has that L&B box on it, before it goes out, it comes across my desk. And I make sure that, again, it's ethical, it's correct, it's up to date. It also is reflective of our overall brand image, and that people not just trust the brand, but they also trust the people that uphold the brand, like our partners, like Shanae and Jared and Hans and Jessica and Michael, and Chris. And so making sure that people know that they're members of our firm, but they're also very highly respected and knowledgeable within their realms of what it is that they work and operate in, particularly within their state. That is one aspect of my job. So it's helping her with those trade show booths. It's helping with her with all of the advertisement that goes in the digital magazines or even in-person magazines. And then we also have things like rack cards. I make sure those are up to date and accurate, all of our banners, all of our backdrops. And then we also have the government affairs, the way that you and I work together, finding some content, making sure that it's search engine optimized before it goes on our website. It's accurate. It's easy to read. It doesn't have so much legalese, as Chris would say, is broken down, to layman's terms, because sometimes the law can be very complex, just as it can be fast moving, right? And so I make sure that our clients and even non-clients are able to read it and access that information without having to go through multiple news channels. And then the one that I'm probably most known for, which is our social media content. When I first got started at the firm, that's what I took directly from Chris. And I just managed all of our social media content and making sure that all of the graphics, the copy, researching the hashtags, all of that is done after our social media manager takes a look at it and she puts it in our social media platforms. And I make sure that it's correct and it gets approved before it goes out to the masses. And we do manage our LinkedIn, our Instagram, and our Facebook. We do not have a TikTok. I get asked that quite often. We do not have a TikTok. We did have a Twitter, but I'm kind of waiting to see how that's going to play out, just like TikTok. But at a time, we did have different social media platforms where all different information went out. And then I also partner with client relations in the single family and the build to rent department and all of their content and everything that goes out as well. So yeah, there's a lot of things that come across my desk at any given day, at any given time. I'm one of those people where I have multiple tabs open and I have no idea where the music is coming from.
Same.
Mm-hmm,
And you even touch like the presentations, the slides, like
yes.
if there's going to be a class that's being taught somewhere, like
Yes.
it's between our team,
Mm-hmm.
either you or Cole, someone is making
Mm-hmm.
sure that our attorneys have those slides.
Yes, I actually did that this morning. Chris is teaching a class at the Upper State Apartment Association, and I had to make sure that everything was good and ready to go and the slides are in order so that way he has what he needs so he can go out there and does what he does best, which is informing and empowering our clients and being involved with our apartment associations. Mm-hmm.
And that's a great segue. So you got in with the firm, then of course, that's how I met Chris too, was through apartment association involvement. How did you find yourself getting involved? I mean, it went really fast once you got involved. They're like, oh, great.
Yeah.
And then here, you work hard, we can use you.
Right. It's like, oh, you have this talent? Great. Here you go.
Yep.
That's pretty much like how it works. I do get voluntold a lot, for sure. And I'm very grateful for that because I love to be able to utilize my skill sets, whether they're developed or currently being developed. I'm definitely grateful for that. But the way that I got involved started with the Greater Charlotte Apartment Association. They gave me a home. And I remember looking at people like Lauren Lee, Deidre Quick Wilson, and, looking at Brian Brand and Betsy Kirkpatrick and Shane Raby and Bill, and looking at all of them and just being like, how do I get to that position? At the time, the first person that I ever saw in a leadership position was Celia Smart. Everybody calls her Seal, but yeah, like when I saw her. She, at the time, was the Products and Suppliers Council president. And if you've ever met Seal in person, she's short, like she's small, and she gets up in front of this podium and she commands this room of all of these like A-type personalities, right? And I was like, how do you do that? Like, how do you get to that space? Like, how do you become that girl? And I also had to ask myself, is this something that I really wanted to do? Because I switched from sales, quote unquote, to marketing because I really wanted to be more behind the scenes, right? Like I'm an extroverted introvert. When I go home, like I get in my jammies, I'm sure like everybody else, and I shut the world off. You know what I mean? So I'm sure you do the same thing, right? And so I just started volunteering, participating, attending my committee meetings. And I will say, and I'll insert a trigger warning here, but I will say the turning point for me was the unfortunate murder of George Floyd. I never expected for that to flip our country, but not only that, our industry and our own personal lives upside down on its head. And I remember being on what was at the time the DE&I task force with Eddie Robertson, God rest his soul. And I remember like us just having these very passionate and transformative conversations. And we were just like, we can't ignore this, but what do we do and how do we do this? And I never would have thought that the content that I was posting on Facebook at the time, specifically revolving around the African American community, I can only speak on what it is that I know, right? And as a Black woman, as someone who comes from a very diverse family, I have Indians, I have Mexican, niece and nephews and cousins and Irish and, so everybody from all types of background is within my family. And I grew up in a very diverse area in Georgia. And so I never would have thought that putting and placing that experiences on my Facebook page would have led for me to end up becoming co-chair along with Eddie of one of the first ever DE&I committees, which was at the Greater Charlotte Apartment Association. And for them to entrust me with that, especially because it had to go to a board vote, I was like, wow, like this is a really big deal. And I took it very, very seriously. And I recognized the opportunity that was there, but also I recognized the gaps, right? Like intentionally or unintentionally, we don't always have, the paths or the avenues for people to be able to get into committee positions or even board positions. It's not intentional, right? It's just, I don't think we ever really sat down and looked at the gaps or maybe even the own bias that we may have. And so we started doing board of director DE&I minutes. And I would come in and speak to the GCAA board and say, hey, like, did you ever think about this? Or maybe this is a reality that your own team members, maybe your own board members are dealing with. And at the time, there was only one person of color that was on the board. And so it was just trying to be able to see how can we create a path, not just for some, but for all, right? And the board was very open to it. I'm very, very grateful for the GCAA in doing that. And then he and I created the GCAA DE&I scholarship, which allowed for people to be able to get their NAAEI designation. And what we recognized was that not everybody's extroverted. Some people are looking to get that designation to advance their careers. And we wanted to make sure that we got people from all backgrounds. And I had to do the presentation in front of the Mary Beth Woodard. And I remember just being extremely nervous. I was so scared because she's an icon, right? Like in our industry. And I had never done a presentation in front of a board before, but Kim Graham and Betsy and Eddie, they made sure that I had everything it is that I needed and we were able to get it passed. It was one of the first within the Carolinas. And I just went on to continue to do what I was passionate about, which was marketing and creating inclusive spaces, but also having really transformative conversations. I never expected to become a facilitator or a speaker, right? Like that was never something that was in my radar, but I have friends like yourself and Chris who believed in me and believes in my talent and my ability to be able to do so. So I've just had the ability to speak at USAA and speak at the South Carolina Apartment Association conference. And I spoke at ANC, and then I did classes with Rebecca Rosario at NAA. And we created the ANC Apartment, Association DE&I committee together, which was phenomenal, and we had one of the first ever inclusive opportunities for people who have visibility or hard of hearing, disabilities, for them to be able to attend and have the ability to participate, which had never really been done before. And again, that had to get approved by the board. The board had to have, that buy-in. And I'm very grateful for people like Lisa Taylor, who was like, yes, we should be doing this. Like, why is this even a question? And so it really is interesting because you're right. It happened very, very fast. I was a chairperson. And then before I knew it, I was one of the first women of color to be Supplier Council president, and now State Suppliers Council president, and all of these firsts. And I didn't have any intention on doing that. I was just answering the call and just doing the best it is that I could, and just surrounding myself with people like yourself who are just as passionate, as I am.
I just not have the opportunity to hear you speak. It's in my opinion, it's a God-given gift. Like, you're speaking from your heart. You've done your homework. You've done your due diligence. The stuff. Like, you get up there and it just comes natural. And you've spoken to, when I was on the board for Upper State, you've spoken to that board about DE&I and how important it is. And I think this is a good opportunity to let people know that although there's uncertainty and there are things going on the federal level, but our affiliates are not doing away with DE&I.
No, not at all. No. Not one bit. And I think that is much thanks to people that are in leadership positions and the facilitators that are out there that are talking about DE&I. I think Alice Jack Yu is a great example in that space where she is just unwavering, right? Like, she is a tree, she will not be moved.
Yes, follow her on LinkedIn.
Oh, yes, most definitely. And she's a person that taught me to be unapologetic. Sometimes we can speak about things that are against the grain and we're nervous about what the outcome can be. And I think that she was one of those persons that when I attended the NAA DE&I committee, at the time I wasn't on that committee, I am now, and I'm very grateful for that. She was just like, you should speak up, like, you should say more, like, don't be afraid, like, go out there and say what needs to be said, right? Like the TikTok thing says, say the weird thing, and so she gave me that courage, and I'm just very grateful for the fact that I was able to do that and continue to do it and educate people that DE&I, while it started during the civil rights movement, is not solely race or gender identity based, right? You can be someone who is now in what we now call the sandwich generation, where now you have millennials and even Gen Z, some Gen Xers, where they have kids, they're taking care of their kids, they're taking care of home, and they're also taking care of their parents, right? I'm in a unique position where it's like, I am also taking care of my kid. I'm also taking care of my grandmother, and with everything it is that she needs, even though she's a state away, I'm still involved. And it is a lot to manage on any given day. And that is a DE&I initiative, to be able to understand that there are people that have been put in a position where they're a caretaker and they never expected to be. And now they have to figure out how to navigate work and life, and both are complex, right? The same thing with women. We were so close into really being able to understand and get the funding of women that are experiencing menopause. Menopause is not a joke, right? It implements and it impacts you on a mental basis every single day, and the way it is that you show up to work, the brain fog, the inability to be able to speak, like not being able to recollect or have a really good memory, your dietary changes, sometimes women break out in hives, some women just lose their teeth randomly, you know what I mean? And it's like, these are things that can impact your confidence, your mental well-being and your overall health. And these are conversations that need to be had, especially if we are going to have people that are not only going to find, or provide someone with a home, but if they're going to be able to do legislative information and updates with members of Congress, right? Like they need to feel confident in the space in which it is that we now know as work, right? And the workplace and the workspace. And so it's important for people to be able to feel confident and comfortable so that way we can get those benefits. And that is the biggest part of a DE&I initiative. It's not this, I guess this term snowflake, thing is a thing. That's not what it is. It's really the human element and just creating a place for people to feel safe, no matter what background they come from, because we're all different, but we do have a lot more in common than what we realize.
Absolutely. And to your point on, menopause, women are in perimenopause sometimes for 10 years when they don't realize what's going on or why they feel a certain way or what have you. And, my doctor has even said, hey, if you think if you're experiencing these things, I don't need to do any type of hormonal checks or what have you. Just that's your reality and that's what you're living in. And it is difficult. Women as early as their 30s. And for those of us in our early 40s and on in to 50s and maybe even 60s, you're dealing with these things. And if we all, those of us who are parents, I have a son who's 16 and you're raising a daughter who is, she's right there behind him. I mean, they're going through these things and we give them grace as much as we can with their hormonal shifts. But then you go back through it again as a woman.
Right. You're learning yourself all over again. You know what I mean? And it's like, I can't imagine speaking in front of a room, right? Or even like what we're doing right now, right? And not being able to recollect or recall information, right? Or just having a moment where you're trying to remember something and your mind just goes blank, right? Or you go into somewhere and it's freezing cold outside. They have the heater on inside of the room and then you have a hot flash, right? And you're just like, sweat is like just pouring from you, right? And there's nothing that you can do about it, right? Like you can't explain it. It's embarrassing. It's taboo, right? But it's a part of human nature, right? There's nothing that we can do to change it. And it doesn't mean that, as a woman, that she is or they is any less, right? They're going through a change and we all go through changes. I saw something recently that was talking about, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And there are a ton of women that unfortunately get misdiagnosed with bipolar or borderline personality disorder. And they get on medication to help them with their anxiety and their depression, just for them to finally stumble across a doctor that is able to really help them identify the symptoms correctly. So that way they can go about it correctly. And it's a really, really, tough process. Being a girl, being a woman is not easy. So when they say fight like a girl, like that is a compliment, because it's hard for us to adapt and adjust to all of the things it is that we go through and that our bodies go through and still be able to show up to work and do some of the amazing things it is that we do on a regular basis. This isn't anything against men or those that identify, as men. They have their own struggles, right? In the transgender community and so on and so forth. Everybody has their own struggle, but I can only speak as a woman, right? I can only speak as a Black, African-American woman. And what I know is that myself and even those that are similar to me, they have their own struggles that they've expressed, and they express it in private and they're embarrassed to talk about it in public, specifically with their manager or even HR department. And I do think we're in an era where HR departments can start to be more transformative, where they work for the people in addition to the company.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you don't hear of, like, when I was on site, there definitely was nothing. They have EAPs or what have you, different companies do, but there's not like a DEI component or even like a task force. Let's look into that. I don't know of any. I mean, if there may be some out there, but I just am not familiar with any. And I challenge the owner operator community to tap in, to
Yes.
listen to your people. You likely, we're seeing more and more women in leadership. When I first started in the industry,
Yeah.
a long time ago, over 2 decades ago,
Mm-hmm.
it's mainly men that were at
Yeah.
the top.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're seeing more women. And if we have these women in these positions, they have likely experienced these things themselves and
Yes.
are potentially able to have those conversations with their teams, because when you're on site and you're front lines in the multifamily industry, you have it coming at you from
Mm-hmm.
all angles. And even with the centralization of certain essential services now, from debt collection to renewal processes
Yes.
and centralized maintenance in some cases, you're
Mm-hmm.
still resident facing.
Yes.
And we take on so many roles. I remember thinking and telling my assistant manager, the assistant property manager that I worked with when I managed Grace, I would say, oh my gosh, we should have gone to school to be a psychologist, because we really just help that person. Like, they're going
Yes.
through it, and then you might be
Yes.
going through it too. And then,
Yes.
like, it's like we might have to take a minute to just namaste, because exactly, we're dealing with
Yeah.
people in their homes, and
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
the most personal thing, one of the most important decisions it is that they will make, and
It is. Mm-hmm.
it's taxing on
Mm-hmm.
on the
You
human body.
you never know what you will see or what you will run into. And there are some things that I ran into when I was on site that I will never forget. Like it will always be, and it will always stick with me. And I think that, sometimes we can forget that humans show up to work, right? I'm not saying that we have to hold, everybody's hand. I'm not saying that we can't still uphold our policies and procedures, right? Like, that's not what DEI is. And I think when we talk about DEI, especially when we talk about diversity, a lot of people think, well, that means, well, some people get included and some people get excluded. That's not the case at all. My boyfriend was in the military, in the Marine Corps for 20 years. And as an African American man, he realized that there were some things that he had in common, with people that came from all the way across the globe, right? It was like, oh, your mama did that? My mama did that too. You know what I mean? And it's like, do we have to say mama by any chance? So it's interesting when we start to really open up our minds, right? I think it's more of a paradigm shift that has to happen in order for diversity, equity, and inclusion to advance. If we say, well, this is the way that we've always done it, and you as a leader are in a position where you're no longer willing to learn, I will just kindly ask you to exit stage left, because the train in which it is that we live on in society is going to continue to move forward, right? We're going to continue to advance, and it can be really, really big steps, or it could be baby steps. And some people may get on the train and some people may not. But all you have to do is take a look at the Costco Target example, right? And look at how Target rolled back and reversed in some of its policies, even though their shareholders disagreed. And now when you go into Costco and they're like, nope, despite what our shareholders say, we're going to uphold our DE&I standards because we know that it's beneficial for us as an organization and also to our shoppers that go in and have that experience. And the lines now are so long, like people are like, what is happening at Costco? Like, I used to be able to get in and get out, and the lines are super long, and people are going in and they're putting their dollars into organizations that feel as though that they not only see them, but are willing to stand beside and behind them. And it's very unfortunate. I'm a huge Target fan. People that know me know that I love me some Target, honey, but for a while now, I haven't shopped at Target, just because I'm just very disappointed, right? Like, I used to go in there because I could find, Latino colored, paper, I could find Hispanic Heritage Month items. I could find things for Black history that I typically wouldn't be able to see. And now to no longer be able to see that, it not only impacts me, but the way that I raise and help raise my nieces, my nephew, and, my kid. And so all of these things are important. And I just don't think they understand the domino effect or how it impacts them. And like you said, people in their homes, which is very, very personal. You want your home to be representative or representation of you.
And we're seeing more diversity on the front lines of the
Yes.
multifamily industry.
Mm-hmm.
When I was first in the industry, it was white women. That's
Yeah.
all you saw managing property.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with the first like leasing consultant that was a guy, like 4 years into my career,
Mm-hmm.
like we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing more men, we're seeing more women of color.
Yes.
It's, they're representative now of their residents, which
Mm-hmm.
everybody,
Exactly.
people want to feel
Exactly.
like somebody can relate to them when
Right.
they're going to go into their home. So as we see our
Mm-hmm.
membership with the different affiliates that we're involved with, and seeing the changes that are happening, I was um, glad to know that DEI is not going away for the multifamily industry. Our
Right.
affiliates are not doing away with their committees and with their initiatives. And
Mm-hmm.
if anything, they're digging their heels in more to say no. We're
Yeah.
going to continue to
Yeah.
represent. Like you brought it up, I think it was last year or the year before, that we needed an ASL interpreter at the South Carolina Apartment Association's annual conference, our
Right.
education and legislative conference.
Right.
Like if someone is hard of hearing, which I know we have friends who I see that they have the little,
Right.
implant there. I have a friend who's an
Right.
audiology doctor, and
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about her clients and patients, and it's an embarrassing thing for them. They're not going to necessarily say, I have to sit at the front because I can't hear if I'm at the
Right.
back. But if you have someone up there that is an interpreter, like that's being inclusive. That's
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
D&I is.
Mm-hmm.
And even like Aisha, that I had on a few weeks ago, Aisha Beverly, I went through a time dealing with food allergies and different things that were problematic for me when I would go to a conference. I would starve. She's like, Katie, what do you eat when you go to these things? I'm like, well, I bring protein bars or whatever from home because I was vegan for a while due to some gastrointestinal situations.
Yes.
But she said, I'm going to bring it up to the DEI committee. We need to have more options for our folks who may have allergies. I mean, that's what we're
Right.
talking about. It's not
Right.
necessarily a race or a gender thing. It
No.
expands. Like if you're thinking like that, you're thinking this way, and really
Oh,
it's
yeah.
so much bigger.
Oh, yes, most definitely. I mean, and we were having the conversation about pump stations, right? Like, I was like, we advertise everything else, right? Like, why not have a pump station?
Right.
And that came to me when I was at one of the conferences and I saw this woman, and bless her heart, like, she was very pregnant, right? And I was like, do we have a pump room? Do we have flip flops? Do we have like some of these things? Do we have fans, like available? Because sometimes these areas can get pretty spicy. They can get pretty hot when you bring a bunch of people, into a room. And it's the little things that we don't really think about, but we should when we're talking about increasing overall attendance and participation. Even our training classes and seminars, right? Like, I know we have instructors that teach the CAM, the CALP, and things of that nature. And I couldn't understand, like, why some of these classes weren't available in Spanish. Like, why are they not available in Braille? Why are they only available in English? Like, do we not have people that could, speak, Spanish or Mandarin, and be able to reach a broader community? And like you said, and you bring up a very great point, it's not that it's any different than the residents that we serve, right? We have Hispanic, Latino, Asian, blind, people that are hard of hearing, seniors. We have people that are all different backgrounds, color, races, and backgrounds. And I just don't understand why, when we have some of these front facing items, they can't be reflective of the people in the industry in which it is that we serve. So I'm hoping that we'll continue to make progress and we'll think about things in an advanced way. And I'm saying we don't have to take these huge steps. We can take baby steps, and that's fine. But as long as we just keep progressing forward, that's all it is that I would love to see from us, for sure.
And I'm so glad that you're back on the D&I committee this year and can continue to bring those ideas to the front, because there are so many underrepresented members who have needs that, just because it doesn't impact us, it doesn't mean it doesn't impact someone. And
Correct.
We have to step outside of ourselves. And I think as we rise to positions of leadership, we see those needs in our teams and in our committee members or what have you. And it just makes sense to elevate those things to the highest level so that they can be properly addressed by those that are in a position to make those changes, like a board of directors.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. The more that we're able to open up the room to people that may even challenge our way of thinking, right? I say this all the time. Like, I like to be surrounded by people from diverse backgrounds. I don't know if that's the Pisces in me, but I like to have people from all different backgrounds and walks of life. That's also how I grew up. And I don't want everyone to agree with me. I want someone that's going to say, well, what about this? I think this way. Okay, great. Why? Like, let's have a conversation about it. And I will say, Katie, like, that's one of the things that breaks my heart right now is it doesn't seem like we're able to have conversation or dialogue across the aisle, right? Like, I don't mean that in the political sense, but it just seems so divided and divisive. It's like you're either on this side or you're on this side. And it's like, well, just because I'm over here doesn't mean that I can't understand or resonate with you over there and vice versa. And I think that we can really learn from each other. And I know that feels very kumbaya-ish, like, oh, in a perfect world, like change the world type thing. But it's like, I really want us to find a way to be able to communicate with each other, even with people that we don't agree with. As long as it is not hurtful or harmful, I think that there's a way for us to have very transformative conversations and see, the other side of the coin that may not necessarily agree with us or even the way that we see it, because the world is complex. As human beings, we're complex people, and we can have, transformative and informative conversations that can allow for DE&I to move forward and not have to revert back or stay stagnant or in a specific standard of place.
Of course. And like you said before, to your point, we're all not that different. When it comes down to it. And that's, I work heavily in the political space where I'm constantly meeting with, Republicans, Democrats. And one thing that we've been able to establish in some of those meetings is that we all agree that an end result may be what we want. Like, we want affordable housing. The way it is that we will get there might differ, but we all, when it comes down to it, have very similar. Yeah,
right.
we're not that different after all. It's the world's a big place full of diverse people, but when it comes down to it, people want to be seen, heard, and understood.
Yes.
And as long as we are providing spaces for them to be able to do those things, we're doing our part. And it's part of volunteering. And it's one of my favorite parts of volunteering is meeting the new people and helping them on their journey. And what's your favorite part of volunteering?
This is probably going to sound a little selfish, but my favorite part of volunteering, and I really had to think about that when you sent the question over. I was like, what is my favorite part? And I'd have to say it is the challenge that it presented to me, right? I didn't seek out to be GCAA Supplier Council president. That wasn't something that I sought out to do. But when I was asked to put my hat in the ring at the time, it was secretary because it's a 3-year position you ascend to president. I really, really had to think about it because I wasn't sure if the association was ready for not just a woman, right, but a Black woman to be Supplier Council president. And that challenged me in ways that I never expected, right? It challenged me in a way that really forced me to get out of my shell and get out of my comfort zone. And I never would have done that if the opportunity hadn't been presented and I hadn't been voted in that position, right? And I've been able to apply so much of what it is that I've learned in my volunteer roles in life. I am not the same person that I was 5 years ago, right? I don't see the world or even operate at the firm the way that I did 5 years ago. And it's allowed for me and given me the gift of advancement. And it's given me the gift of being able to, my second favorite part, if I may, make lifelong friendships, right? Eddie was like a brother to me, and the loss of him in life and in our industry hit me in a way that I never expected. I'd never lost a friend before, right? And so when he passed unexpectedly, like literally saw him one day and the next day he was gone, right? I was like, how do I navigate this? Like, he was part of the reason why why I'm here in the first place. And now you're telling me he's gone, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, how am I supposed to navigate this? And the way that everyone rallied together, the way that everyone came together, the way that we supported each other, and the way that I'm still supported to this day, I couldn't have asked for a better opportunity. I couldn't have asked for a better way to be able to navigate work and life. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. I would do it all over again. It's not just giving up your time. It is quite honestly a life-changing experience. My grandmother, bless her heart, thinks I work for the White House because every March she sees me go to the Capitol, you know what I mean? And like, I'm doing all of these things, and I've gotten a chance, nowhere near to the scale of you, Katie, but I've gotten an opportunity to meet with politicians and, leaders. And I never would have dreamed that for myself, right? And I will say, like I said, I know it sounds a little selfish. It's kind of like me, 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 me. This is all of the benefits that I've received, but it's changed me and it's changed my life for the better. And my family was able to get through some really hard, dark times because of the fact that I had volunteered, given up my time. And in the end, they gave me so much more than I never could have expected. And that is not just the GCAA, that is all of the affiliates within the Carolinas and even in Georgia. The Atlanta Apartment Association gave me one of my first opportunities to speak, and it was with Chris. And I was like, this isn't nerve-wracking at all. Right. To just have your boss sitting there watching you, giving a class about DE&I nonetheless. But it's been transformative for me. And I have so many favorite parts that I could go on and on about, but if I had to pick two, it's them putting me in a position where I was uncomfortable and I had to learn to get comfortable, but also making lifetime and lifelong friendships. I don't just consider my friends, they're family, right? And I do whatever it is that I can do for them, for sure.
You do. And I'm very blessed to be in that number, as they say.
Listen, Katie, I got you every day and twice on Sundays.
Yes, I'm so appreciative of that for you. And I don't think it's selfish because you use everything that you've learned to help others. You epitomize paying it forward in that way. And you mentioned some of the affiliates that you're in. I would love for listeners to know what all you are involved in and what history making roles that you hold, because out there, somebody's listening. Somebody's listening to this, looking at you saying, I want to be like her. And they look like you. I can open a door, but it's different when someone who looks like you helps someone who looks like you.
Yes, yes, yes. I was the first, like I mentioned, to be the first Black woman in about 50 years, supplier council president. Now I'm State Suppliers Council president, and I'm the first woman of color to ever do that. I'm the first Black female to be on the supplier side on the Greater Charlotte Apartment Association Education Foundation Board. I'm now vice chair. And behind Deidre Wilson, I will be the first Black woman, but on the supplier side, to ever become president in 2026. Creating 3 different DE&I committees within the Greater Charlotte Apartment Association, the Apartment Association of North Carolina, and the Triangle Apartment Association. And I have to give a special shout out to the GCAA and the TAA, who gave me a DE&I Champion of the Year award, which one of them was renamed after Eddie Robertson. And I cannot express my gratitude to the GCAA and Brandy, his wife, and their family in providing me with that opportunity to be the recipient of that award. Very, 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 very near and dear to me, for sure. winning social media of the year 7 times. I think that is bananas. that is one of the things and one of the words that I use quite often, because again, I never expected it. I never expected to do that. And even in terms of having the difficult conversation like the one I had with the ANC and NAA, there was a time, and it wasn't intentional, where apartment lies occurred during Juneteenth. And I was like, we have to recognize this. We can't just let Juneteenth go by and we say nothing. And when I tell you, Katie, I was shivering in my boots. And I remember having the conversation with my boss, and I was like, Chris, I'm going to say something, right? And if it's okay with you, like, it may be a little controversial, and I'm not saying anybody did it intentionally, because they had planned apartmentalize years out, right? And at the time, Juneteenth was not a federal holiday. And so we had to have the conversation of, what are we going to do? How are we going to celebrate it? And, I'm very grateful that NAA and the DE&I committee was willing to give me a seat to be able to ask the hard question, and they addressed it. And they did a really good job in celebrating Juneteenth at Apartmentalize, and we'd never done that before. I'm not saying I'm the only person, but I know at the time, I was chair of the ANC DE&I committee, that was something that I wanted to bring to their attention, that we wanted to have the conversation about. Me and my vice chair, Bridget, at the time, and I'm so grateful for her. And so I've made a lot of history. I've been involved in almost every affiliate within the Carolinas, and even Georgia to some degree. And now I sit on 2 boards. I sit on the ANC board and the GCAAEF board. And it's just, Katie, it's amazing. I can't even express it to you. And if someone's asking themselves, what does it take? For me personally, it took surrounding myself with really good people who have my best interest at heart, who are also going to hold me accountable, working at an organization that not just believes in me, but sees me and my talents and what it is that I can bring to the industry and to the firm. It took a lot of courage. I tell people oftentimes, like, if you wait for the perfect opportunity, the perfect chance will run you by, right? There's no such thing. Do it scared, do it broke, do it afraid, just go out there and just do it, right? Because you never know what you're going to be capable of unless you try, right? And so I just try to remind myself that I may not be the perfect person, but I'm going to do the best it is that I can. And that's all it is that I can do. And just having that mindset has allowed for me to be able to enter into doors, and hopefully, prayerfully, I am not the last one, right? I want someone else to make history, but it's a chance, it's a risk. And I'm not going to sit here and say that it's easy or it's always sunshine and rainbows. And I know, speaking to you, Katie, I'm preaching to the choir, right? But the risk is very, very much worth the reward. And so I'm very grateful for that.
And that's a perfect segue into basically what you would likely tell. What would you tell a woman who looks like you, who's thinking like, okay, I may want to start? And even Amanda, she's just starting out. She's a woman of color. We have a woman of color as secretary for USAA's Government Affairs Council for the first time. Shout out to Miss Damika Mitchell. Thank you, Damika.
Yes.
And yes, love Damika. And Amanda, they're watching. They're watching you. What do you have to say to our future leaders?
I would say be encouraged, right? Like, you are going to have people that are not going to agree with you. They're not going to see things the way that you see them, and they may not fully understand you, right? You're going to have adversity against you. And that's not a ground or an area, unfortunately, that you're not familiar with, right? We're very much well aware of that. The world would like to control us and keep us in a specific spot or space. And you've already taken the first step into breaking that glass ceiling and making an opportunity in a way, not just for yourself, but for others, right? Whether they're like you or not, you made a way for somebody to be able to take the next step. Because like you said, Somebody's watching you, and you never know who's watching. As the oldest of 8, I've heard that my entire life, right? My sisters and my siblings and my brother, they're always watching me, right? So I got to be a good example, and I try. But with all that being said, one of the things that I know we as Black women do not do well, and I'm going to hold your hand while I say this, is we do not give ourselves grace. Give yourself some grace, right? Be honest with yourself when you need to back away, when you need to say no. And no is a complete sentence. It's not no and, no or, it's no, period, in the discussion, right? So please, sis, give yourself some grace. You're doing a phenomenal job. You're doing all that you can, and that is all that you are required and expected to do. But please take some rest, take some time for yourself, and don't let that little voice in your head get the best of you, because it will. And you are strong and beautiful. And I just want everyone that is watching and looking to please be encouraged. You already had some amazing examples. I mean, Shanae is a beast, right? She is a beast of an attorney and a person, right? When I grow up, that's who I want to be, right? And she knows when to take rest, right? And sometimes she doesn't. And sometimes I have to be like, so when is your vacation? When are you going on break? When are you going to take some time for yourself? Or sometimes, and you know this, I'll be like, look at this wonderful vacation spot. You should go, right? So if anything, right, I don't think they need to be told like how to go out here and be audacious. And I'll say that I got that from Steve Winch, but please take some time out for yourself and give yourself some grace.
You heard it here, ladies. You heard it here. And
Mm-hmm.
this is one of the hardest working women I have ever met. And I don't know when she sleeps. Liz, what do you do to wind down? Now, we all know you are you're a card carrying member of the Beehive. Like,
Oh, yes.
Yes. How do you wind down? Is Beyonce music involved?
Mm-hmm. Almost definitely. There are random times my poor dog and boyfriend have to listen to my on or off key singing of probably Cowboy Carter now for the umpteenth time. I have not stopped listening to it. I've done, if you follow me on Instagram, I have done extremely thorough research on cowboy culture, American culture, and Cowboy Carter and how it all intertwines. I would love to speak about that one of these days. That's probably one of my dream classes. But I make sure that I just have a moment of silence. One of my favorite things to do, as much as I love Beyonce, is to sit out on my patio. My phone is off. Sometimes I have a book, sometimes I don't. And I sit there and it's just me and my tea and my dog sometimes. And I just sit there in silence. There's no talking, there's no anything. It just really allows for me to have the time to reflect and just kind of reflect on my day or my life or whatever is going on. And sometimes I don't think about anything, right? I just sit there and I just look at the scene and what's going on and the people going on about their daily lives. And that is one of the ways on a regular basis that after all is done and I'm Liz Newkirk, for everybody, I can just be by myself in a moment in a space of quiet. But when that's not happening, yes, you are correct. I am listening to Beyonce at any given moment with the same record on repeat.
A record-breaking record, history-making Grammy win here a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, I screamed as if I knew Beyonce herself. And I was just like, I think I had the same reaction when she got the country album of the year. And like, she jumped and she was like, I was like, same, like, oh my gosh, this very complex album that really questions genre and what does it mean? And what does it mean to be a country album, right? And it even forced me to ask myself, what is country? Like, does country sound like this? And I just think it's amazing, and I really encourage people, like, you don't have to like it, but gosh, you have to appreciate the artistry and the storytelling, that's in the album. And it's just phenomenal. I mean, it has really allowed for me and given me space to go down a rabbit hole that is very close and near and dear to me. I have some very country loving, family that's down in, Florida and Texas and Georgia, and all they wear all day long is like their python and alligator cowboy boots. All of my aunts had chickens, and one of my favorite stories is I went to go stay over at my cousin's house, and I remember hearing like something scratching in the tub, and it was an alligator or crocodile or something like that. I don't know what it was, but it was something that was not supposed to be in the tub. And I definitely remember that. And, like it's so interesting to really ask ourselves, like, what is country, And when I think about country and when I thought about this album, it really allowed for me to kind of get back to my own roots, So don't ask me to wrangle no chickens, though. That is not happening at all.
Yeah, right there with you in that respect. Now, what are you looking forward to the most this year?
I have to say one of the things that I'm really looking forward to, and I know it sounds like really, really simple, but anytime I plan a vacation for myself, sometimes I do solo vacations. Like I just go by myself. No dog, as much as I love my fur baby, but nobody, right? And I will go on these solo vacations on my own. And I've set one up for myself, and I am so looking forward to it, right? I am so looking forward to just having some me time. And as I'm sure you know, Katie, like we are everything for everyone, our families, our friends, our jobs, the associations, like we're always somewhere doing something at any given moment. And so I really, especially after 2023, forced myself to really start having like self vacations. And I'm really looking forward to it because it allows for me to reconnect with me and just enjoy my own company. And I think that's very important when you're pulled and tagged in many different directions. I have to find ways to fall in love with me and just, who I am and what it is that I love to do and just advance my own personal mindset and spirit. And so I'm really looking forward to that.
It's so important. You've got to be
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with yourself and enjoy your own company. It's
Yes.
so important.
Yes.
You've got to do that.
Yes.
I can't wait to hear where you go and the great
Mm-hmm.
time you have. And as we're coming up to the end here, I always ask as the last, it's probably like for you, like it is for me, trying to like pick your like favorite handbag or something. But what is your favorite song? Do you have one?
Right now, my favorite song and the halftime show that she did just cemented this. It's Yaya on the Cowboy Carter album. Like when Beyonce was on that stage and I heard like that guitar strum that came from, these boots, were made for walking, right? Like I instantly remembered it because my grandmother had that vinyl record. And so I've always loved that song because believe it or not, I love cowboy boots, right? And so when that song came on during the halftime show, I was like, oh my gosh, it's Yaya, right? And so I love that song. I cannot stop listening to it. And when I go to the Cowboy Carter concert, I am so looking forward to hearing that song. Like I could hear that song and I could just leave after that. Like I don't even have to hear the rest of the album, but that song is just, it's excuse my French, but it's so badass. It touches like all the aspects of it, and her vocals in it is just, it's just a work of art. I can't, yeah, there's nothing else I can say. It's my favorite song. And so I'm probably going to listen to it on the way home today.
And folks should follow suit. Go out and listen to Yaya on Beyonce's Cowboy Carter album, her Grammy Award winning album.
Grammy Award winning Cowboy Carter. Yes. Hmm.
Well, thank you again for being with me today, my friend. I certainly appreciate it and know that listeners will gain a lot of insight and inspiration from our talk today.
Yes. Thank you so much again for having me. It was an honor and a privilege.
My pleasure. Open invite for any time.
Oh, yay.
And that is it for today's episode of The Real Spill here on the Multifamily Media Network.
Bye.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of The Real Spill, a podcast where I spill on all things multifamily advocacy and how we as industry professionals can work together with our elected officials, stakeholders, and allies to bring about change for the rental housing industry. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've learned something new. Now, go be a voice. Until next time, Spills out.